Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
You've always been like that, ever since you were a kid. All the children sit normally, they play with what they are given, but you always wanted more than the other kids, as if you were better than the others. Melissa kept silent. She knew that when her stepmother was in such a mood, it was better not to argue with her. Vanessa was not a bad woman, at least not when she started living with Melissa's father and moved into their house with her son Gary, who was only a year older than Melissa. But she always gave the kids the same treatment. Everything was fair. Stepmother was easily turned on with half a turn, as Gary said, but easily calmed down as well. Unlike their father, who took a lot of effort to make angry, but if Eric got angry, everyone got angry. So it was even easier for Melissa to confess her childish pranks, but Vanessa, of course, was the first to grab her heart and start wailing. "Oh, Devils again made a mess, and I have to deal with it. I am angry with you. Why do all children have children like children, and I have devils?" After that, the guilty children were punished, and no one remembered their misdemeanor anymore. But when the stepmother learned that the stepdaughter after graduation is going to enter the city, she could not calm down for a long time. Her father, of course, was not happy either, but as usual, he did not express his feelings. Vanessa first hoped that Melissa would come to her senses and stay in her native village, as Gary had done, but the girl, unlike her half-brother, always knew that her place was not here. She dreamed of going to the city and becoming a fashion designer or clothing designer or stylist. Melissa didn't know the name of her future profession, but she was sure that she would make people beautiful, just like her mother. She didn't remember her mom very well. She had left when Melissa was 7, but when her daughter remembered her, the image of a light fairy from a fairy tale came to mind. Big blue eyes, blonde hair almost like Melissa's own, a slim figure, fair skin, a gentle voice, and a dreamy gaze. In their village, Mom appeared to be a creature from another world. She did not know how to dig a vegetable garden, milk cows. All household chores were done by Daddy. Sometimes Grandma, Dad's mom, helped. She did not like her daughter-in-law, who was not at all adapted to village life, and often used swear words to remember the day when her son brought her from the city. Melissa's mother liked to do only 2 things, baking and sewing clothes, and she did the former while sewing. Melissa still kept her childhood dresses made by other hands, except that when Melissa was 7, her mom disappeared. The girl for a long time could not understand what happened. All asked her father where her mother was and when she would be. He was silent. The answer was given by her grandmother. "She left you, she left you. She ran back to the city. She couldn't live here. I told Eric as soon as he brought her here. I told him she was no match for him. She's so blissful. She doesn't belong here. I hope we raise you normal." Probably, in order for her granddaughter to grow up normal, the second wife to her son, Grandmother Clara, found herself. A simple homemaker, experienced in the family business. "Here, Vanessa," she told Eric. "She's a normal woman. She's already given birth to a son, buried her husband, and nothing. She can manage such a household on her own. Let's connect her yard with yours, and we'll live like people." Her son obeyed, got married, and although in some sense Vanessa replaced Melissa's mother, the girl never forgot about her mother. Somewhere deep inside, she was sure that it was only necessary to come to the city, and she would find her mother. Surely that has already become the most famous fashion designer, and her daughter will be the same. They will meet at some fashion show, and her mother will immediately recognize her, and will be proud. And now the day has finally come. Today, even the loud displeasure of her stepmother walking her to the bus couldn't spoil her mood. Vanessa put her stepdaughter in what she thought was the best seat, made sure the old brown leather suitcase was squeezed firmly between the seats. "All right," she said sternly, glancing glumly out the window. "You right there as you settle in." Suddenly the stepmother leaned over sharply and awkwardly kissed her stepdaughter on the cheek. Then, as if frightened, she also abruptly recoiled and got off the bus. Melissa saw through the window her rapidly receding back. She's good after all, suddenly the girl thought, even though she's not a mom. Melissa once again scrutinized the list from beginning to end. Her name was not there. Didn't get in? A tall, skinny, red-haired girl, wearing funny glasses with duct tape, asked her sympathetically. "It's just a mistake," Melissa said confidently. "I'm sure I got in." The red-haired girl shrugged. "If you're sure, go to the dean's office. He has all the lists. If you want, I'll walk you there." Melissa nodded. While they were walking down the narrow, dark corridor, she asked my acquaintance, "What's your name?" "Caroline." "And you?" "Melissa." "And you got in?" "Here." Caroline was surprised by the question. "Yeah." "No, I didn't apply here." "Then what are you doing here?" "I was just passing by. It's hot outside, so I thought I'd come in and sit for a while." It's interesting to watch the applicants, how they are happy, sad, studying this list with such hope that it hurts. Melissa was surprised at this way of spending time, but decided not to let it show, especially as they were just approaching the dean's office. "Come on," Caroline encouraged her. "I'll wait for you here." Melissa knocked gently, and from the other side of the door came a muffled voice. "Come in." In the office sat a short, stout, gray-haired man with glasses. "Yes, yes," without raising his head, he asked cheerfully. "What is it about?" "I'm here about enrollment. It seems that they forgot to put me on the list of those who passed the exams." The dean raised his head and looked at the girl in surprise. "Last name, first name." "Taylor Melissa." "Just a moment." He pulled up a thick pile of sheets, flipped through it with quick honed movements, found the right one, and read it carefully from beginning to end, frowned and looked at Melissa. "There is no mistake, Melissa. You didn't get in. You didn't even come close to the passing score." When he saw the girl's face, he added softly, "Try again next year, but prepare yourself properly, okay?" Melissa nodded and left the office. Caroline, as promised, was waiting for her in the corridor, looking with interest at the stand with the history of the department. "Well," she asked, "did you figure it out?" Melissa nodded, feeling tears coming to her eyes. "Sorted out, I didn't get in." "Oh, I'm sorry." "Don't worry, you'll get in next year." My older sister, too, only got in the second time. Nothing, she graduated with a red diploma. Melissa smiled strainedly. "That's great. Come on, let's get out of here." It was especially nice outside. The sun was shining dazzlingly, the birds were singing, the flowers in the flower bed near the university were filling the air with a lusciously sweet fragrance, as if no one in the world cared that her, Melissa's dreams had just been shattered. "Where are you going?" Caroline asked. "Maybe we should go the same way." "Actually, I'd like a coffee and a snack right now." "What do you say? I'm going to the train station," said Melissa and shook the hand in which she was holding the suitcase. "I'm not from here, I came from the village." "Oh, how long is it to get home?" 4 hours by bus." "Don't you have any relatives here?" Mom wanted to say Melissa, but held back and only shook her head negatively. Caroline looked at her pensively, as if she were thinking about something. Finally, she asked, "Do you want to go back home to the village?" "No." "Then let's go for coffee, and then we'll figure it out. They walked up to the little red car. Throwing the suitcase into the trunk, Caroline said, "It will be awkward to drink coffee with it." They ordered coffee without getting out of the car, just drove up to some window. Caroline dictated the order, and almost immediately a smiling girl in a uniform gave them everything. Melissa didn't even know it was possible. "Delicious," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "Thank you for the treat." "You're welcome." "What was your plan in case you didn't get in?" Melissa sighed and lowered her eyes. "I didn't have a plan. Geez, are you really as naive a country girl as you seem?" Melissa put the paper cup in the cup holder and opened the car door. "Thanks for the coffee. I'm going to go." Caroline laughed and grabbed her arm. "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't say that to hurt your feelings. It's just that, really, life is so unpredictable. You have to be ready for anything." The naive country girl sighed and sat back down. "I don't want to go back to the village, Caroline. There are no other options. I thought I'd study, live in a dormitory, get a scholarship, then get a job. Well, you can live at my place, get a job, and prepare for college at the same time." Melissa looked at her incredulously. "Why would you do that?" The girl shrugged her thin, hale shoulders, covered with freckles. "Why not?" She started the car and drove Melissa to her home. Caroline lived in a large 2-room apartment on the first floor of an old 9-story building. It had been renovated probably 20 years ago, but as soon as Melissa entered it, she immediately felt some kind of cozy atmosphere. It was obvious that Caroline had grown up here, and everything was the same as it had been when she was a child. In the first room there was a piano, on which were stacks of yellowed sheets of sheet music. Next to it was an old chair upholstered in cracked brown leather, the swivel leg of which creaked with every movement. Opposite, near the wall, there was an old and slightly worn sofa, and above it hung a bookshelf, where a few photo frames were interspersed with dusty old books with yellowed pages. "Your parents?" Melissa asked. Caroline nodded. "Why is Dad in that weird suit?" "He's in character." "An actor? An opera singer?" "Wow, that's great. What's Mom like?" "A diplomat. Like my older sister." "Wow." Caroline shrugged her shoulders. "Shall we keep looking?" "Come on." The second room was a bedroom. There was a big bed, a platinum wooden closet high to the ceiling, and shelves with lots of dolls. Mom brought them back from every trip. Melissa remembered that she had only had 2 dolls as a child. One, a bald rubber puppet that I think her mom had bought her back in the day, and a second Barbie doll that her stepmother had given her for some Christmas. "I think you'll stay in the third room," Caroline said thoughtfully. "It's kind of like a guest room." The third room had a fold-out couch, a wide, dark dresser, and a television set. A desk and chair took up almost all the rest of the space. "Thank you," Melissa said, and set the suitcase down. "Well, sort out your things for now. Towels and linens are in the dresser. Don't be shy. The bathroom and toilet are just to the right of the front door. Get some rest. Maybe you need to sleep or just lie down. I'll do my own thing, and then we'll go out with the boys tonight." Melissa had never been to a country house, especially one so big and beautiful. A huge 3-story brick house was full of cheerful young guys and girls, most of whom seemed to be girls who had had too much to drink and were loud. Caroline, in this company, felt like she belonged. She introduced Melissa to everyone, introducing her as her new friend and future clothing designer. Melissa smiled shyly and wished she could fall through the ground. She didn't remember anyone. All the cheerful faces seemed equally alien. Absent-mindedly taking a plastic cup of wine in her hand, she stepped aside. Then she saw the back door to the yard open and slipped through it. It was much quieter outside. Sure, there was a couple hugging on a bench near the porch, but there didn't seem to be anyone else in the back of the garden, where a white gazebo stood between the trees. That's where Melissa headed. She sat down on a bench, put a glass of wine on the railing, and closed her eyes. Why is such a fairy sat alone? A pleasant male voice sounded right above her. Melissa opened her eyes and saw a tall, handsome guy. "Michael, Melissa, nice to meet you. So what are you missing?" "I don't know anyone there, and everyone else has had a lot to drink." Michael raised his eyebrows and scratched the back of his head. "I'm sober, and we just met." He sat down next to me. "It's beautiful here, isn't it?" "It is," Melissa agreed. Michael's eyes really did seem completely sober. They were also large and dark, and they looked at Melissa so intently that she felt both hot and cold at the same time. She wished she would go away or sit here with her until morning. "Caroline, get up. You're late for work." Melissa knocked insistently on her friend's door. No one answered. Sighing, the girl pushed the door open and entered. Caroline was sleeping sweetly, with her head covered by a blanket, with only her left heel sticking out from underneath. That was the one Melissa tickled. "Aya!" Caroline shrieked and threw the blanket to the floor. She woke up. Satisfied, Melissa said. Her friend sat up on the bed, wiping her eyes unhappily. "How did you get so much strength, Melissa?" "I heard that you came back again in the morning. Did you go out with Michael? You haven't had enough of him for a month, have you?" Melissa smiled embarrassedly. "Did you read until morning again?" Caroline stretched. "Yes, Alex gave me his new novel to review. It's still a draft, but it's entertaining." "Okay, let's get breakfast. I can drop you off at work. Then you wash up," said Melissa. "And I've made breakfast. I'll open the table." In the kitchen, Caroline asked, "Do you regret working as a cleaner? Just tell me. I'll find something more suitable for you at my place." Melissa shook her head. "No, I like everything and I can learn a lot there." "Sweeping floors?" Actually, Melissa squared her shoulders proudly and raised her head. "I also clean the windows and take out the trash." Caroline snorted. "But seriously," the proud cleaner continued, "you can learn a lot from Cassandra, even just by listening to her yell at her assistants." "Well, if that's the case, I won't interfere with your learning process." When Melissa woke up in her new friend's apartment after a weekend spent at the cottage, it was clear to her that she needed to look for a job immediately. Even though Caroline said that she didn't have to pay for housing, she still needed money for food, transportation, and everything else. Melissa was not used to living on her own, but where would they take a young girl without education and residence registration? For some reason at that moment, Melissa remembered the words of her stepmother, who said so to her son Gary, who had finished school and now didn't know where to go to work. Jobs are like mushrooms. There are always and everywhere full of them. You want to find a job? Go outside and look around. That's what Melissa did. She walked for 2 hours, studied the city, admired the tall buildings, large green parks. When she was already tired and went home, her eyes fell on a small ad. "Need a cleaner at Cassandra's fashion house, full-time." Melissa went to the address given. The sign Cassandra's fashion house was visible from afar. Huge, elegant white glossy letters on a black background. A high white marble porch led through transparent doors into a room with a ceiling on which Melissa could see whole paintings, some flowers and clouds, angels, warriors on horseback, as in a church. A thought flashed through her mind. She wanted to look more closely, but she felt dizzy and hastily lowered her gaze. "Young lady, who are you here to see?" A high-pitched female voice sounded. A slender woman in an airy white blouse and a very tight black skirt approached her. "Hello," said Melissa. "I'm here from an ad. Do you need cleaners?" "We do." A dry voice came from somewhere in the back of the room. "Only we have very strict requirements. Not everyone can do it." The woman who greeted Melissa indicated with her eyes that she should follow her. Together they walked through the whitewashed, almost empty hall, except for the mannequins and clothes racks along the walls. At the back of the room was a massive wooden table piled with a bunch of colorful pieces of fabric, buttons, all shapes and sizes, brooches, belts, and more. Behind the table was a large black leather armchair in which a woman in her 60s was sitting and smoking. She had very short gray hair and attentive black eyes that scanned Melissa from head to toe. "I'm ready to start work even today," Melissa said. Cassandra grinned. "In fact, the requirements are the same. To clean well and do as you're told, that's a given. It's not even up for discussion. The main thing is to be indispensable, a quiet gray mouse." "I can do that," Melissa said confidently. Cassandra looked at her assistant. "Nora, did you hear her? Get the girl formalized." She took a drag on her cigarette and tucked into a black leather folder, with some drawings and photos. "Let's go." Quietly with just her lips, whispered Melissa Nora. So the girl who came a few days ago from the village got into one of the best fashion houses of the city, even as a cleaner. Only after seeing everything from the inside, Melissa realized how much her idea of style, fashion, clothing design differed from how everything looked in reality. It became clear why she hadn't enrolled. Cassandra's demands to be quieter than water, lower than grass, she complied. Silently wiping mirrors, dusting, collecting fabric scraps, Melissa caught every word of her boss, tried to memorize every image created in the studio. And though she worked every day from morning till evening, she didn't feel tired at all, especially since Michael took her away in the evening. Melissa had never met such a man before. He was amazingly energetic, easygoing, and always in a good mood. All the men who lived in her village, whether they were 15 or 50, were always puzzled about something. Usually the thought of where to make money and how much booze they could buy with it, and Michael took her to a new place every day. During that month, she had looked at the night city from the observation deck, ridden horses, stroked dolphins at the dolphinarium, walked through the botanical gardens. Melissa realized that she had fallen in love within a week. True, Michael did not say anything to her about love, but she saw that he felt the same as she did. It seemed that all these years of life in the village, with a strict stepmother and cold father, in poverty, without love attention ended. Now her life will be fine. In addition to work and meetings with Michael, Melissa was studying hard for admission. She studied all the textbooks she could get her hands on. One day, she cautiously approached Nora and timidly said that she would like to learn more about fashion and style. "Follow me," the assistant said nonchalantly and led Melissa into some dusty back room. There were mountains of folders, magazines, drawings. "These, you might say, are the archives of our fashion house," she explained. "Study them, memorize them. Some of them even have Cassandra's notes on them." "Thank you," Melissa said shyly. "You're doing a good job. We haven't had a cleaner for more than 3 weeks in a long time. I can see you catching every word she says. It's the right thing to do." Melissa decided to come clean. "I want to become a fashion designer, a clothes designer, but I couldn't pass the institute exam. I want to try it next year." Nora looked at her critically from head to toe, and Melissa suddenly felt, from her long braid, which she braided to keep her hair out of the way, her old simple dress, and her cracked shoes, "I should give you a uniform. Nora said thoughtfully, "I haven't had time to do it. And as for your plans, what can I say? There's a lot of work to be done. So if you want, do not waste your time. Study everything from the very basics. What are the fabrics? How what items of clothing are called? The history of fashion, and then already go to our archives." "Thank you," repeated Melissa. Nora nodded and walked out. All in all, Melissa had never felt so happy, and tomorrow was a day off. Michael promised to pick her up in the evening and surprise her. Melissa didn't want to get up in the morning. It had been a busy month, and she didn't want to miss the opportunity to lie in bed as long as she wanted. She had never had that at home. Her stepmother always woke them up gary, bright and early, and made up work. Melissa still remembers the night before her birthday, molding dumplings all morning. The thought of change made her nauseous. The girl opened her eyes, stretched, and sleep finally left her, and the unpleasant sensation that had originated somewhere in her stomach traveled up her esophagus. Melissa jumped up and ran to the bathroom. "Caroline." Indignant, she said to her friend, walking into the kitchen, "I can smell from the room that these eggs are stale. Why are you frying them?" Caroline raised her eyes from the book in surprise and looked at her friend. She stood up, walked over to the skillet, and sniffed her nose. "I bought them yesterday. What makes you think they're stale?" The smell alone made me sick. Melissa opened the window wide open, and the fresh air made her feel better. Caroline frowned. "When were you supposed to get your period?" Melissa didn't immediately realize what her friend meant. "I don't know," she answered confusedly. "I think it should have started by now. I wonder if you should take a test. Take one on my shelf in the bathroom." "I don't know how to do them." Caroline sighed. "Come on, I'll tell you." A little later, when Caroline had already put breakfast on a plate, having previously made Melissa porridge, she returned to the kitchen. Positive. "Wow, I don't know what to say. Depends on whether you were expecting it or not." "I wasn't," Melissa admitted honestly. "But I'm very happy, and I think Michael will be happy too." "Great, then, and introduce us at last." "He's picking me up tonight. I'll ask him to come over." "All right. Pregnant woman, let's have breakfast." All day, Melissa walked in high spirits. The news was unexpected for her, but it seemed that everything should be so. She still had to tell her father and stepmother. At that moment, Melissa remembered that she still hadn't written to them as promised. They don't even know she didn't get in and probably think Melissa is a diligent student. She felt ashamed. How could she even forget to write to them? Probably her father thinks she stuck up or even ran away like her mom. She also remembered Vanessa kissing her goodbye and telling her to write. Okay, at least now she had a story to tell. She has a job. She's actively preparing for college. There's a fiancé. There's going to be a baby. This evening Michael was running late. He was supposed to pick her up another half hour ago. Call him? Caroline said. What if his car broke down or something? I don't have his phone number, said Melissa. How come? I don't know. I didn't get it. We saw each other almost every day and agreed in advance when we would meet next time, and both of us are at work during the day. Caroline frowned. Do you know where he works? No. Okay, well, what's his last name? No, I didn't ask. Ah, okay. Caroline went over to her friend, gave her a hug. Let's wait till tomorrow. If he doesn't show up, we can go to his house. Melissa walked across the room. Caroline, what if something happened to him? Melissa, what could have happened to him? Even if it did, you won't know about it, so we wait until tomorrow and go. That night she didn't sleep much. Images of Michael getting into an accident, being attacked by hooligans, or the rope breaking in the elevator he was riding in came into her mind. She slept for a couple hours and woke up early feeling completely wrecked. Caroline, she knocked cautiously on the door of that one's room. "Melissa, it's 8:00 a.m. Sunday. Can we get another hour of sleep?" "Let's go, please. I can't take it anymore." "Okay." Caroline stretched sleepily and looked carefully at her restless friend. I can't say no to a pregnant woman. No one opened the door for them. Melissa was nervous. She was already pounding desperately on the door, beating her palms off. She hadn't taken her finger off the bell button for probably 5 minutes before that. Caroline stood nearby and grew increasingly gloomy. "We should probably call the police," Melissa said. "What if he's lying there unconscious on the floor?" "Well, yes." In a strange, colorless tone, Caroline said. At that moment, the door of the apartment across the hall opened. "What are you doing up so early in the morning?" A sleepy woman of about 40 in a robe asked unhappily. "I'm sorry." Melissa turned to her. "It's just that the guy who lives here doesn't answer the door. We're worried something's happened to him. Why are you looking for him?" Even more annoyed, the neighbor asked. "He moved out yesterday." "Moved out how?" Silently, he ordered a car. All evening they carried some things, he himself. Then he went out with his bags. It wasn't his apartment? Caroline checked. No, of course not. He'd been renting it for a year or so. "Right," said Caroline. "Thank you, we'll go." She took Melissa firmly by the elbow and led her towards the elevator. The roommate hummed and slammed the door shut. "I don't understand anything," said Melissa when they were on their way home. How could he leave like that without a word? Caroline pressed her lips together and gripped the steering wheel even tighter. She seemed to struggle with herself for a while, but she said it. "Melissa, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but I think there is nothing wrong with Michael. He just used you while it was convenient for him, and now he's apparently moved on to other things and women. How can you say that about him?" Caroline turned the steering wheel sharply and braked. She turned to her friend, looking at her. "Melissa, wake up. Do you think it's normal to date a man for a month and not know anything about him? No last name, no place of employment, no phone number. Do you think it was an accident?" Melissa was silent. Caroline saw tears running down her cheeks. All the anger went away at once. "I'm sorry, baby," she said. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just can't let you live in an illusion and make excuses for him." The tears rolled down as if on their own. Her mind was empty. Strangely, Melissa felt no pain at that moment. On the contrary, everything inside her felt frozen. "It's a pity that I'm working and I can't go with you." Caroline sighed. "Isn't it today that they will tell the sex of the baby?" "Aha," said Melissa, trying to catch the long, narrow-down jacket. "And don't worry about the ultrasound. I feel great, and it's only a 4-stop bus ride from work. By the way, how did the fashion house feel about your pregnancy?" Melissa sighed. "Cassandra doesn't know yet. She doesn't see anything but outfits, in my opinion, and she certainly won't be looking at some cleaning lady. But Nora guesses, even though I've embroidered the uniform and it's less noticeable. She's been looking at me strangely. I guess I'll be able to hide it for a month or two, and then it's over. I'm afraid they'll fire me if they find out. It's illegal, so don't worry. If they do, I'll get the labor inspectorate on them. I told you, you can stay with me as long as you want, even when you don't work. You can't go back to the country. Did you write to your parents?" "I just told them I didn't get in and got a job." "What are they saying?" "Are they calling you back?" "Strangely enough, no." Melissa grinned. "Actually, it was my stepmother who answered the letter. I don't know what my father said, but she says I'm good and will definitely enroll next year. It's kind of scary, to be honest. Well, she probably missed you and compared how to live without the help of a second woman in the house. We should go see them, but later. All right, I gotta go to work. Okay, I'll see you tonight. Cassandra seemed to have noticed a change in her coworker's appearance today. Even though Melissa tried to turn her back when the workday was over, she called her into her office. She's going to get fired, Melissa thought, wiping her sweaty palms on her pants. Definitely going to get fired. Cassandra, as usual, was smoking and looking at the sketches on the table in front of her. "Sit down," she said, pointing to the chair next to her. Melissa sat down, trying to retract her stomach as much as possible, which of course was no longer retracting. "Is it this or this?" asked Cassandra, sliding 2 pictures towards her. "For the window display?" "Yes, it will stand in the center." "This?" Melissa pointed confidently to the left photo. "Why? It looks more vibrant. The second image seems casual, and this one reflects the collection you've been working on." Melissa hesitated for a second, but added, "And I also think that it creates some kind of New Year's mood. People will look at it and immediately think that the holiday is coming soon." Cassandra said thoughtfully, looking at the picture again. "Not bad, by the way. I called you here for a reason." This is going to start now, Melissa thought. "Would you like to be a junior assistant in the future?" Melissa looked at her boss in surprise. She looked completely serious. "I do." "Good. Don't be surprised. Nora told me about your plans for the fashion world. I'm not blind myself. I see that you do not miss a single word, and with the belly of the floor especially cannot help. So, you know." "Honey," Cassandra sighed. "I'm old, of course, but I'm not blind yet." "You're not going to fire me?" Melissa asked cautiously. "Did you even listen to what I told you?" "Yes, but—" "That's it. Get out of here. Work while you can." Cassandra abruptly opened the sketch folder and stared at it. Melissa already knew that at such moments it was better not to approach her boss. She carefully stood up, whispered her thanks, and walked out. The bus was long gone. Melissa stepped from foot to keep warm. Besides her, the only other person at the bus stop was a small old woman. Though Melissa didn't like to stare at strangers, this woman caught her eye. She was wearing a long red checkered wool coat, and in her arms sat a large black cat, who was watching Melissa intently with large green eyes. Finally, the bus pulled up and Melissa and the old woman got on. Payment at the entrance. The driver shouted so sharply that the girl almost dropped her bag. She paid, went through, and sat on the first seat of the empty bus. The old woman stopped in the aisle, took the cat, and began to look for something in a small, beaded black purse. "Well," the driver asked impatiently. "Now, just a minute," politely answered the old woman. "Somewhere the coin fell down. Probably the lining is loose." The driver defiantly sighed noisily. The old woman began to look in the bag even harder. The cat meowed unhappily. "Take it," Melissa said, holding out the money to the driver. He hummed, but said nothing. The girl returned to her seat. The old woman sat down next to her. "Thank you, my good man." "You're welcome." "Can you tell me when the plant stops?" "I get off at the polyclinic. Yours is just before it. I'll tell you." "Are you going for an ultrasound?" the old lady asked. "How did you guess?" The woman smiled, stroked the cat, and pointed at Melissa's belly with her eyes. "It's not difficult. So far, almost no one notices. The term is small, especially in a jacket. I have an experienced eye. I can tell you something else interesting." The black cat suddenly stood up, stretched, and climbed from the old woman's lap to Melissa's lap. "That's a good sign," said his mistress. "Usually the cat doesn't approach strangers, but he likes you." Melissa stroked the cat. His fur was warm, almost hot. "What did you want to tell me?" The old woman smiled, closed her eyes, and suddenly began to sway back and forth slightly. "You yourself were an accidental child, but you brought much joy with your birth. You will find your mother twice more. The first time falsely, then truly. The path you've chosen now is the right one. Follow it. Name your daughter Olivia. Don't go back to the past. Look to the future." The old woman's voice was so melodious, smooth, quiet, as if it put Melissa into a kind of trance. She heard everything, understood everything, but time seemed to slow down. Every word of the unexpected prediction was etched in her memory. "Girl," the familiar rough voice of the driver sounded. "Young lady, the polyclinic, you're getting off here, right?" Melissa looked out the window. Yes, it was the right stop. She didn't even notice how the bus stopped, and the most surprising thing was that the old lady with the cat on the next seat was gone. "The fetus is developing perfectly. All indicators are normal. I do not see any pathology." The doctor, a young, beautiful girl, was always friendly with Melissa, called her mommy, and always in understandable words told what she was doing and what were the results of the examination. "Mommy, do you want to know the sex of the baby?" "Sure." "It's a girl. Name the daughter Olivia." Melissa remembered the old lady's words. She knew. The girl said quietly. "Knew what?" The doctor asked again. "Nothing, it's nothing. You say you're all right?" "Yes, and how do you feel?" Melissa smiled. "Fine, like I have more strength and energy." "That's wonderful. How much longer can I work?" "You can work as long as you feel like it." At home, Melissa gladly lay down on the sofa and closed her eyes. At last one could relax after an eventful day and think about everything. She could hardly define her attitude to fortune-tellers, clairvoyants, and other mystics now. Though, of course, her upbringing in the village had left its mark. For example, Melissa remembered well how her stepmother periodically put a saucer with milk and a piece of sugar for the housekeeper. To keep everything in order at home, she explained to little Melissa and Gary. The children even tried several times to see the house spirit. Once, after waiting for their parents to fall asleep, Gary and Melissa snuck out of the room and hid behind the stove so that they could see the white saucer on the floor. Even after the house was completely dark, the saucer glowed dimly. They sat there until their feet were stiff, but they never saw anything. But then the milk was gone and the sugar was chewed. I must remember properly what that old woman had said to the cat. Name the daughter Olivia. Every time she remembered Michael, her heart clenched painfully. Melissa habitually dropped her hand to her stomach. She wouldn't admit it to Caroline, but somewhere deep down, she still had hope that Michael would come back. She even dreamt about him a few times. Then she'd wake up and find him in her bed. Then he'd come to her work. Then he'd just ring the doorbell. The bottom line was the same. Michael was telling her that it wasn't his fault that he had to leave her. Now he was back, and they would be together forever. And then Melissa would wake up alone every time, in a big empty bed. You'll find your mother twice more. The first time falsely, then for real. It's not clear what the second part means, but it's best to focus on the first. She'll find Mom. Somehow, with everything that's happened, finding Mom has taken a back seat. Maybe that's what she should do now. Go see her dad. He probably knows Mom's relatives, friends, her old place of work, or some addresses. Strange she hadn't thought of that before. About the path and about looking to the future instead of the past, it wasn't very clear yet, but she would think about that later. Melissa had a strange feeling as the bus pulled into her home village. She felt both as if she had never left here and as if she had never been here at the same time. Those little old wooden houses, the shaggy dogs barking at the bus. The women in warm shawls and the men in fur hats seemed near and far at the same time. It was as if Melissa had seen it all some time ago, in a past life. She walked along the familiar streets and felt like a daughter who had returned to her homeland after years of wandering and hardship. But when she saw the house, she realized how much had changed in those 6 months. She left here as a little girl, yesterday's schoolgirl, and returned as a future mother. Melissa is here, the voice of her half-brother. Gary was chopping wood when he saw her. He dropped the axe right there on the log and ran to her, huge with ruddy cheeks and hair sticking to his forehead. He rushed to his sister, hugged her tightly, lifted her up, and spun her around. Gary let go. Melissa laughed. "I'm very happy to see you two. Are your parents home?" "At home, let's go." They went into the house, with Gary putting his huge arm around her shoulder and not wanting to let go the whole way. Melissa suddenly thought that she hadn't even texted him once in all this time and felt ashamed. A half-brother, and he had always treated her like a sibling. At home, she was the first to see her stepmother. She stood at the table covered with flour and, as always, was cooking something. Her father was not visible, probably sitting in the hall in front of the TV. "Mom, Melissa is here." Vanessa turned her head and gasped. Melissa, even for a moment, it seemed that the stepmother was happy to see her, and even as if she spread her arms to embrace her stepdaughter. But after a second, as if ashamed of her impulse, she put her hands to her sides and said angrily, "Well, look who came to us, not Dusty." 6 months without a dream, and here, unannounced, in broad daylight, fell like snow on her head. The stepmother took a noisy breath, as if gaining air, and continued, "Come in, Undress. Why did you get up, as if you had come here for the first time, and go to the stove quickly. She's all cold. Her nose is white, Gary. Make her tea with raspberries." Father appeared in the kitchen. He wiped his eyes in confusion and did not immediately realize what the commotion was about. When he saw his daughter, he didn't even smile. "Hi, Daddy," said Melissa and hugged him. Her father hummed strangely and barely touched her with his hands. "Sit in the room for now," Vanessa commanded. "We'll have dinner soon." Melissa and her father and brother went into the hall. Eric turned up the sound on the TV and went back to watching his favorite show. Gary asked, "How's your job going?" "It's great. They even promised me a promotion. I'll be a junior assistant now." "That's great. That's great. How are you doing?" My brother shrugged. "I'm fine. I'm home for now. But after Christmas, I'm going on a shift up north." "For how long?" 3 months. "Wow." My brother looked pleased. Mom's worried. He said, "It's like you weren't happy either. But I'm happy. I'll make money and finally see the world." Melissa suddenly realized that Gary had probably never been further away from the village. Melissa decided to tell her about her pregnancy the next day, especially since her stepmother had looked suspiciously at her belly the day before. Each member of the family reacted differently to the news. Gary was excited to be an uncle. The stepmother opened her mouth and said, "Oh, for heaven's sake, I knew it." And the father just got up and walked outside. Gary nodded reassuringly to Melissa and went after the stepfather. "Nothing," Vanessa said. "He'll come around, a little shocked right now, of course." Melissa suddenly realized that she should take advantage of the effect her news had had and talk to her stepmother. "Vanessa," she began timidly, "did your father ever tell you about your mother?" The stepmother looked at her unhappily, frowned, but answered, "Yes, When we first began to communicate, please tell me everything you know. He will never tell me, and I am an adult. I have a right to know. She has a right. The stepmother muttered, but then looked at her belly and sighed. Come on, you're going to be a mother soon. You can't have all that weight of your own mother pulling you down for so many years. Melissa felt her heart roll frantically. Was she really going to find out what happened to her mom now? Vanessa began. It's not like I know all the details. Eric told me once when he had a little too much to drink, and it was a long time ago. Anyway, they met when your father came to town to take a chauffeur's course. I think he liked your mom right away. Eric said he didn't understand why she paid attention to him. It was clear the girl was from a rich family. I remember there was some weird story. She either had a fight with her parents, or they went somewhere else, or died. Anyway, she and Eric had a very fast relationship, and by the time he passed his exams and was about to leave, she suddenly proposed to him, saying, I want to live with you, and I want to live in the village. Melissa was surprised. For some reason, she had always thought that her father had dragged her mother to the village by deceit or maybe by force. Then it turned out that the bride was pregnant, they were quickly married, and then you were born. And when she left, you may remember, you were not so little. Melissa nodded. She remembered it very well. Didn't your father say why she left? Vanessa shrugged her shoulders. He only said that it had become clear to him quickly that she didn't belong here. At first, Eric hoped his wife would adjust to village life, took over all the housework, and sat with you when she could. But no, your mother was very homesick. It was as if nothing pleased her. Not even me. Melissa said quietly. Her stepmother reached out as if she wanted to pet her, but halfway through she pulled her hand back. Eric said she loved you. That's why she lived with him for so many years, but she was getting worse every day. He knew one day she would leave, and so she did. I want to find her, said Melissa. There must still be some addresses, phone numbers, where she lived when they met, and her parents, my grandparents, didn't they ever come to visit us? No, my father said that. He entered somehow unnoticed, and the women even flinched at the sound of his voice. The father walked heavily, sat down on a vacant chair, and began to talk absent-mindedly, looking at his daughter. I tried to find her. There were no cell phones back then. The only address I knew was her apartment, which she rented with a friend. 8 years later, other people lived there, and no one had heard of your mother. I never saw her parents either. It seems like she had a big fight with them, and at the time I met her, she hadn't spoken to them in months. I don't even know if they knew they had a granddaughter. I think while she lived in the village, she didn't communicate with anyone from the city. Her parents seemed to be very rich people. That's all the information I have, so there's no way to find her, Melissa asked. Her father frowned. If she wanted to, she could have come here herself after all these years. If not to me, then at least to you, or at least to send a birthday card. The trip to the village left Melissa with mixed impressions. She had hoped so much that she would find a clue as to how to get on her mother's trail, and as much as she didn't want to admit it, her father's words stabbed her very sorely. Surely her mother could have visited her in so many years, and since she hadn't, she didn't want to see her. Well, she would soon have a daughter of her own for Melissa to take care of. Tell me about your trip, Caroline asked her. After listening to her friend's long story, she sighed. What can I say? Your father is probably right. In fact, you have a lot of other things to do right now. There's a promotion coming up at work, isn't there? Aha! Melissa smiled as the thought of work was pleasant. Of course, it's just a nice title, junior assistant. In reality, there will be almost no difference in salary, and the job will be mostly serving and fetching. Also, Nora promised to organize a theory exam. You'll pass, my friend said confidently. It's okay, everyone starts small, but you'll be one step closer to your dream. It's not like scrubbing floors. You're right, as always. All in all, I'm happy with everything, except that I miss Michael sometimes. Melissa glanced at Caroline, knowing that she would be unhappy at the mention of her failed fiancé, but she suddenly suggested it. I was thinking maybe we should ask around. The ones who were at the summer cottage when you met. Someone must have brought him there. They must know his close friends. Maybe parents, brothers, or sisters? Don't, Caroline. I was thinking the same thing. It's just like Mom. If he wanted me, he would have contacted me a long time ago. But what about this? Well, if I find him, what am I gonna say? Hello, Michael. You're a scoundrel. Here's our daughter. Pay child support. Melissa shook her head. No way. Olivia is my daughter. I don't want him to have any rights over her. I'll raise her myself. If she asks who her father is, I'll tell her everything I know. Caroline sighed. Well, it's up to you, and I'll help you in any way I can. Thank you. The exam with Nora, Melissa seemed easy enough, and though Cassandra's assistant kept a nonchalant expression on her face, it was obvious that she was pleased. Lastly, she led the girl into the holy of holies of their fashion house, the so-called dressing room. Essentially a huge room with countless racks of clothes, shoes, and accessories. There, Nora asked to put together a few sets for different occasions. Melissa managed it. Well, congratulations, said Nora. By the way, when is your due date? Around the beginning of April. Well, that's not soon great. Just in time to model in Cassandra's spring show. Model? Melissa thought she heard wrong. I'm not a model, and my belly's gonna be huge. Just what you need. Nora said nonchalantly. Cassandra is currently designing a maternity collection. At the end of winter, beginning of spring, she wants to present it, and she wants you as a model. Oh, wow. It's no big deal. We'll get it ready. There's plenty of time. But in the meantime, here's a list of your new responsibilities. Starting tomorrow, you're no longer a cleaning lady, but a junior assistant. In fact, you do what, say, me or Cassandra, you will need to prepare clothes, shoes, deal with coordination of fitting, clarify appointments, see that all consumables were in sufficient quantity, and much more. By the way, how long do you plan to work? As long as I can. I feel great, and the doctor said it's okay. That's great. Of course, after the birth, you'll go on maternity leave. We all understand that, but keep in mind, Cassandra's not gonna wait around for 3 years, or even a year and a half. I understand, Melissa replied. I'm not going to sit around that long myself. In fact, she had no idea what to do. Caroline cannot sit with the child, she works. There is no money for a nanny. Who else would she ask? The father? I don't think he'd do it. All right, she'll think of something. She thought for a moment that Caroline was right, that she could find Michael and ask him for help. He obviously didn't need the money, but Melissa felt sick to her stomach when she imagined that he would refuse her, or start lying, making excuses, or saying that it wasn't his child. Surely he was counting on never seeing her again. No, Melissa would not impose. There was a lot of work at the new position. Melissa even sometimes thought that if she had remained a cleaner, she would have moved much less. But the girl did not complain. She felt excellent on herself, and at work she was ready even to spend the night, and everything went easily and well with her. As it happens when a person is engaged in his work. Of course, pregnancy made its own adjustments. It was necessary to visit doctors, go to courses for pregnant women, buy things and furniture that will be needed for the future baby. And then there is also preparation for the future enrollment at work. And with a friend, Melissa tried to get out at least once a week. Caroline licked her spoon and shrugged. No, this situation doesn't seem weird to me at all. Are you tricking me? Are you plotting to nail me and clean me out, or sign over my apartment to yourself? No, Melissa answered, surprised by such strange questions. That's all, said Caroline. I am helping you because I want to and I can do it. Remember, a person helps you only if he wants to help you. Because we always have the right to say no. I like being friends with you. I'm not the easiest person to be friends with, even if it doesn't seem that way at first glance. And you're, how can I put it, a good balance for me. I don't feel any discomfort from your being here. On the contrary, only joy. Thank you, Caroline. I hope someday I'll be able to return the favor. You already are, says the girl. You buy the groceries, you clean the house. I'm not even talking about the fact that you've practically freed me from cooking, and I hate it with all my soul. And in the future, I plan to tell everyone that I once lived with a celebrity from the world of high fashion. Melissa laughed. Tell me about it, and I like cooking. And I'm also thinking about the future. When my daughter is born, I will stay at home for the first time, I don't know, for a month, 2, 3. Nora made it clear that Cassandra will not wait for me 3 or even a year and a half from maternity leave. Wait, clarified her friend. I thought he would be gaining experience with them until the summer, until you enter the institute. There is a correspondence department. Then I could stay to work in a fashion house. Yeah, that would be ideal. But I'm just dreaming. Sadly, Melissa sighed. I haven't yet had the opportunity to prove myself enough for Cassandra to say, yes, this is our future star. I'll leave her on any terms. The friends laughed. First of all, Caroline urged, there is no harm in dreaming, especially if dreams are backed up by action. Yours are definitely backed up. Think about 6 months ago, you were a naive little country girl. Forgive me, but you were. Melissa nodded, showing that she took no offense and agreed with her friend's words. Caroline continued, and now you are a young, confident future mother working in the most fashionable house in the city. That's quite a leap. Secondly, you will have some kind of show at the end of winter. Maybe you can show yourself there, at least as a model? Melissa thought for a moment. Maybe you're right. If I can be useful to Cassandra in creating her maternity collection, maybe she will mark me. Well, there you go. You already have ideas. Great. What other news do you have? Not anymore, Melissa replied, but she lied. Yesterday, Melissa saw her mother. Nora had sent her to pick up another box. The girls with the bags got out, and Melissa followed them. She didn't know what to do. She was tempted to rush back upstairs and start looking for her mother all over the mall, but then a bout of nausea hit her, and she almost ran to the exit for fresh air. Outside, she felt a little better, and she was beginning to wonder. Maybe this woman just looked like her. And Melissa had only seen her for a few seconds, so it seemed like it. It was just her brain, flooded with hormones, suffering from hypoxia in the stuffy elevator, that saw the blonde hair, the blue eyes, and slipped her the belief she wanted to believe. Nevertheless, the episode was now constantly in her mind's eye. Toward the end of January, Melissa began to realize for the first time that she was pregnant. No, psychologically she realized it, but with her body she felt only the periodic movements of her daughter, and that was all. What other girls told her about swelling, fatigue, weakness had bypassed her until that moment. Still, it was a long time ago. She was slower. She didn't want to get up so early. It was harder to put on her shoes. She wanted to lie down during the day. Caroline noticed it first. "Well, Melissa, you should regroup your forces," she said. "Concentrate on work and do less housework." "Who's gonna do the housework? You work all the time, too. Why don't we invite Vanessa to visit?" For a month or two, Caroline met Melissa's stepmother when she went to the country with a friend to celebrate Christmas. She charmed everyone there. Gary seemed to have literally fallen in love with her and even regretted that he was leaving for a shift in a few days. The stepmother was unusually lively and friendly and showed unexpected warmth and concern for her pregnant stepdaughter. And even the father was a little less glum than usual. Vanessa? Melissa tried to picture her stepmother in their city apartment. She wouldn't go. She had a household there, and her father wouldn't let her go. She doesn't like the city, and she doesn't like me. Her friend smiled slyly and averted her eyes. Melissa knew when Caroline had that look in her eyes. "Did you two make a deal behind my back?" she asked. "Well, not exactly a deal," Caroline answered evasively. "But before we left, we had this conversation. I told Aunt Vanessa that she could stay in my apartment if she wanted to take a break from country life, and Caroline showed me what to look for on the internet. I know that girls are watching their figure now, and I read about pregnant women that it is bad for them to gain a lot of weight. It will be hard to give birth, and the baby will have a bad effect. So I started to look for how to feed you delicious and useful." "Thank you," Melissa said sincerely. Stepmother, as if embarrassed, her cheeks slightly pinked, and she habitually waved her hand away. "What else do I have to do here all day long? Clean up and go to the store, 2 hours of work. It's boring to just sit around all day, so I'm looking for recipes." Stepmother suddenly began to reveal herself to Melissa from another side. It was hard to understand what was the matter. Either she was finally resting from the hard village life, or from her heavy, silent husband, or Melissa had grown up and Vanessa no longer felt the need to teach her about life. It turned out that her stepmother was a very caring and gentle woman, thinking of others hardly more than herself. However, Melissa realized that she had always been like that. She had never separated her stepdaughter in anything, had never given Gary more than she did, except that she did not know how to express her love and to give the affection so necessary to a little girl growing up without a mother. Now she was interested in Melissa's life and work. At first, Caroline furtively listened to Melissa telling her friend about how she had read Coco Chanel's biography and spent half a day looking for transparent square buttons. Then she started sitting next to her, then asking the meaning of words she didn't understand. For Caroline, Aunt Vanessa became almost like a second friend. They somehow easily found a common language, and with Caroline's easy hand, stepmother began to read books, watch movies, and the two of them even periodically went out for some walks if Melissa was busy. It was the day of the spring collection show, Cassandra's Fashion House. The whole previous week had merged into one interminably long, hectic day for Melissa. She probably wouldn't have survived without Vanessa's magic soups and chicken cutlets. While it seemed that they were going quite on schedule, and Melissa, on the contrary, had expected to rest for a couple days before the show. However, the experienced Nora had told her right away that this was not going to happen. "You'll see, in a few days Cassandra will have had enough of the attack. She'll be thrashing around like a tornado, tearing everyone and everything to shreds and screaming that everything is wrong. Get ready." Melissa did not believe it. The supervisor looked completely calm, but everything happened just as Nora had predicted. In exactly 1 week, Melissa walked into the studio as usual, bringing the last 2 boxes of shoes, and barely managed to dodge a purse flying past her face. "No," screamed Cassandra. "This is all completely wrong. This is terrible. This was a bad idea in the first place. They look like cows in those dresses. No one's going to take it. My career will end at this show. The house will go bankrupt. They'll turn this place into a beer stand. Judging by the helpers huddled in the corners, she'd been raging for a long time. Only Nora stood firmly beside her boss, apparently trying to say something. Melissa, clenching her palms into fists for courage, approached Cassandra with an innocent smile. "Cassandra, why don't we try it on me now?" In a sweet voice, she suggested. "We'll see what's wrong right away. There's plenty of time to adjust." The boss lady smoked. "What's there to fix? Only if you put all these rags in a pile and set them on fire." Nora glanced quickly at her assistants, who, as if on cue, began chanting to Cassandra about her genius. She pouted her lips and rolled her eyes like a little girl. "That's it, suckers!" She barked, but it was obvious the flattery had worked. "Okay, Melissa, put on that jumpsuit over there." As Melissa changed and walked down the makeshift catwalk, the boss's face turned even more sour than usual. "Not that," she said. "What's wrong? I can't figure out." Melissa plucked up her courage again and said, "The belt is unnecessary. It seems to emphasize the waist, but I don't have one, and it divides my figure into two uneven parts. If I took it off, it would make the look softer and smoother." Said Cassandra, and in a few ruthless movements, ripped off the sewn-in belt. "Yes, now it's just right." This way, in the time they had left, they had adjusted the entire collection. But despite this, Melissa still felt a growing excitement, even though she had been practicing. It was scary to imagine that she was a girl from a village with a large term of pregnancy. Today will go on the podium in front of a room full of people. "What do you have to be afraid of?" Nora encouraged her. "Your boss is a beast, and you're not afraid of her, and going to the podium is just a walk." "I'm sorry, but this is Cassandra's night, not your recital. You will be looked at as one of the many models, nothing more, but each of her looks will be examined under a microscope, looking for flaws and scrutinizing every detail." Melissa was reassured by this. Indeed, her business is to go out 3 times, walk along the path in a series of similar pregnant girls, among whom there are not even professional models, and quietly go on vacation. But Cassandra will have to endure all the critics, competitors, journalists, and just those who want to express their opinions. Caroline and Vanessa came to support the young debutante. As a thank you, Melissa herself prepared their looks for the show. Caroline sat in a long emerald green dress, which shaded her curly red hair, and stepmother in an elegant light beige pantsuit. She even straightened her back, and no one would think that this woman has lived all her life in the village, taking care of cows and weeding the vegetable garden. Her first appearance, Melissa did not even remember. The hall in front of his eyes merged into one big blur, and she only mechanically stepped over her feet and kept a trained smile on her face. As she walked backstage, Nora hugged her tightly. "Melissa, you did great. That was awesome." Quickly changed for the second outing. The second time was a little calmer. She even found Caroline and her stepmother in the 3rd row with her eyes and smiled at them. At the same time, a vague uneasiness came over her. Melissa did not understand what it was caused by. Her stomach did not ache, so it was definitely not related to the baby. She seemed to see something in the hall. But what? "Melissa, change quickly. You're closing," shouted Nora to her. For the 3rd time, even though she was the last to go, Melissa was absolutely confident. The show was almost at an end, and judging by Cassandra's satisfied face, everything had gone great. She could tell from the audience's reaction that they were enjoying themselves. Her eyes slid to the front row, and Melissa almost stumbled when she saw a fragile blonde in a dazzling black dress. It was her. There could be no doubt now. Her mother was looking straight at her. Melissa herself didn't realize how she didn't faint or drop everything and run to her mother right off the stage. On autopilot, the girl finished her walkthrough, remaining on stage with the rest of the models. She even seemed to clap and smile when Cassandra came out and the audience greeted her with a round of applause, but Melissa herself didn't take her eyes off the woman on the front row. Her mother recognized her, definitely recognized her. Barely waiting for them to get off the stage, Melissa ran up without even changing her clothes. The guests from the show moved to the next room where the buffet was to be held. The girl squeezed among the guests. Someone recognized her, said compliments, but she heard nothing, looking for familiar blonde hair and black dress in the crowd. "Mommy!" At last she shouted. There was no doubt now. She really hadn't changed much in 12 years. Maybe her cheekbones were a little sharper and her eyes a little harder. "Melissa," the woman said cautiously and touched her arm lightly. She looked more frightened than pleased. "Did you recognize me, Mother?" Melissa asked joyfully. "Of course you did, my girl. How could I not recognize my baby? Even though you have grown up and yourself." Her mother nodded at her belly with a smile. "Getting ready to be a mother. I was hoping you wouldn't have it as early as I did." "Early?" Melissa asked incredulously. Her mother looked away. Apparently she didn't want to draw attention to them. Somewhere in the distance loomed the vaguely familiar silhouettes of men in black. Melissa remembered that they were the security guards who had been with her mother at the mall at the time. "Shall we step back a little?" Mother asked affectionately. They walked through the hall and out onto the covered balcony where it was warm and empty. The mother sighed, rubbed her cheeks, and apparently determined to tell everything, began. "I wasn't 17 when you were born." "Oh," that's all Melissa said. And somehow she had never thought about the fact that her mom was so young. Eric didn't know about it. I only told him at the marriage ceremony, but he guessed about you later. "Figured out what?" Melissa asked, and then she realized, "I'm not his daughter." Mom lowered her eyes. "Yes, I was very young then, stupid, spoiled. My parents are very rich people. They never denied me anything. That must have played a part. When I became a teenager, I suddenly started to show character, drinking, smoking, going out with different bad guys, and one day, I don't remember why, I quarreled with my parents, decided that I would run away from home and start a new life. I found a new friend, and we started renting an apartment. I had money. Then I found out I was pregnant, and that's when I met Eric. He was so simple, so honest, completely different from the guys I had before him. I thought it was the universe sending me a sign. I went to the country with him so my parents wouldn't find him, got married, then you were born. And then," Melissa asked in a completely dry voice. Her mother looked at her guiltily and then averted her eyes. "I couldn't live there. I realized that I was too young to be someone's wife, much less a mother." She suddenly took her daughter's hand, and she barely managed to keep from wrenching it away. "I tried, honestly." Mom continued. "You should know how much I talked myself into staying. Every night when you and Eric fell asleep, I'd look at you and say, 'There they were, my family, my husband, my baby,' but I felt nothing. You were like guards keeping me in a cage I couldn't get out of." "Like guards?" Melissa asked, feeling tears running down her cheeks. "And one day I just ran away," her mother continued, as if she hadn't heard her. "At first I wanted to leave a note to explain everything to you and Eric, but I couldn't find the words." "In 12 years?" Melissa asked quietly. "You couldn't even send me a birthday card." Her mother lowered her head. "Did you go back to your parents?" "Yes. You didn't tell them about me?" No. Do you know who my real father is? She shrugged. Honestly, I don't really remember anymore. I was going through a difficult time, and after I came back to the city, I never saw anyone else from that company. Do you live with your parents now? Mont shook her head negatively and said very quietly, No, with my husband. Is that how he keeps you safe? She shrugged her shoulders in an embarrassed way. He's a very rich man and very jealous. Mont bit her lower lip and said in a pathetic, pleading tone, I'd hate for him to find out about you. You wouldn't give me away, would you? Melissa shook her head in the negative. Her mother suddenly perked up and smiled as if she had a wonderful idea. If you want, I will introduce you to your grandparents, won't I? And you and I can see each other whenever you want. Then she looked back at the guards and added, Well, maybe not very often, but I can call or write to you sometimes. Is that what you want, Mom? Asked Melissa and looked into her eyes. Her mother looked both guilty and frightened at the same time. Melissa suddenly realized that she was not at all happy to see her daughter. She might have been happy at first, because she thought that now she would be relieved of the guilt that had been weighing on her shoulders for so many years. But she seemed more afraid now of what her new rich husband would think of her. Melissa took her eyes away and through the glass door of the balcony. Suddenly she saw her stepmother, who appeared to be looking for her. Vanessa looked very worried. Suddenly she turned her head and saw Melissa, and relief appeared on her face, and Melissa suddenly remembered clearly how she had gotten the flu when she was 11 years old. She'd had a fever of 40, and her stepmother had stayed with her for 3 days. She wiped her face with a wet towel, drank raspberry morsels and broths. She put her big, cool, broad palm on her forehead and also remembered the graduation. Melissa wanted to make her own dress then. She and her stepmother went to the neighboring village and spent half a day at the market, in the rain, looking for the right fabric. When they finally found it, her stepmother haggled for a long time, knocking down the price. Then Melissa felt ashamed and embarrassed for Vanessa. It was only when she was paying that the girl noticed that her stepmother had taken the last of the money out of her purse. If she hadn't knocked down the price, they wouldn't have had enough money for the purchase. And where had her own mother been all these years? Playing cranky daughter to her parents, who she hadn't even told they'd become grandparents. Her mother never grew up. She played family when she was young, and when she got bored, she left her husband and daughter, easily ripping them out of her life like a negligent student rips a spoiled sheet out of a notebook. Then she returned to her parents, pretending to be an innocent girl who had done a little mischief. Then she found a new husband who would now cherish and protect her like the same little girl. How could she, Melissa, have been so blind all her life? You'll find your mother twice more. The first time falsely, then for real. It was now quite clear what those words meant. Melissa opened the glass door and stepped out to meet her stepmother. She wanted to say something, but didn't have time because Melissa hugged her tightly and firmly. "What are you doing?" she asked fearfully, gently stroking her stepdaughter's back. "We've lost you here. You're chatting with some girl." "By the way, who is it?" "No one." Melissa answered firmly. "Nobody." "You chose a good name, Olivia," Vanessa said contentedly, pushing the stroller with her granddaughter along the park path. "God-given, just like her, all bright and smiling." Melissa smiled. She did. Her daughter was a real sweetheart to everyone around her. She was really growing up to be a quiet, sweet girl, only 3 months old, and Melissa was already starting to go to work. Olivia stayed under the care of her grandmother and Aunt Caroline. A couple times she even took her daughter with her. Cassandra suggested that Melissa, after her vacation, take on the development of a children's clothing line. "Why?" calmly said the supervisor. The market for pregnant women after the spring show we have already almost captured. It is logical that they will now want to dress their children with us. Melissa promised to think about the proposal after all the study. Albeit by correspondence, a child, work, there are enough things to do. Of course, she couldn't have done it without Vanessa's help, but it was a pleasure. She went to the village for a short time, just to see that everything was all right with her husband and the house, and after not spending a week there, she asked to come back. Doesn't Eric miss her? Caroline asked her once. Vanessa shrugged. Yeah, he's never been emotional with me, even when we were first married. He said, I help you raise your son, and you help me raise my daughter. We keep the household in half. That's all love is. So I don't think she misses him. The stepmother felt better and better in the city and enjoyed walking with Melissa and her little granddaughter in the park. Melissa could not even call her stepmother. Oh, what a beautiful car! Suddenly the woman said admiringly, pointing to a black Mercedes on the opposite side of the street. Melissa looked at it and shuddered. The car seemed very familiar to her. A second later, a tall and very handsome young man with piercing dark eyes stepped out of the Mercedes, accompanied by a long-legged brunette in a short dress. She recognized him at once. In the first second, she couldn't even believe her sensations, and to make sure, she pressed her hand to her heart. It was beating evenly, her breathing didn't quicken, her legs didn't shake. She didn't want to faint or run into his arms. Yes, Melissa no longer felt anything for Michael. Don't go back to the past. Look to the future, she said thoughtfully. She caught Vanessa's puzzled look, smiled, turned away from the car, and rolled the stroller into the back of the park.